Hello everyone. Firstly, I'm really excited to be here today. I'm really honoured to be invited to talk about our project, the Pallasboy Project, which is a project that has been...
The microphone.
Is it not on? Hello?
Maybe lean it towards
Okay, sorry. It's a project that's been funded by the World Wood Day Foundation grant for the past 3 years. And it's given us an opportunity to do some amazing research into Iron Age and Bronze Age artefacts that have been found submerged in peatland in Scotland and Ireland. And what we've done, it's the term experimental archaeology. We've looked at these objects and we've recreated them, and by their recreation we've understood more about the culture that was around at the time and the process of making and crafting them. This is our team. It's Dr. Benjamin Geary, who's an expert in wetland archaeology, Cathy Moore, who is an expert in prehistory woodwork and woodworking tools. Myself in the middle, I'm a historical woodworker, and Brian McDonough on the end, who is a archaeologist, and he's a filmmaker, photographer, quite talented guy, and he's our artistic curator of the whole project. The first thing we do is, once we've decided on what we're going to make, we go to the place where it's stored and study the object. We measure it, and Cathy has a technique of looking at the gouge marks on the top of the surface of the wood, and from that she can work out the size and the shape of the tools that we used, and we have these tools recreated. So the first object that we made was called the Pallasboy vessel, that was found in Ireland in County Westmeath in the Tor Bog, and it had been preserved for, I think it's about 2,000 years. And we had a set of tools made based on the ones that we thought were the ones that we used originally, and then just started work. One thing we found really difficult with all of our projects that we've done so far is sourcing the timber. It's very hard to find the sort of timber that we need for these projects. The forests that were around in prehistory were so different to the forests we have now, especially in Ireland where there isn't that much woodland. The trees were wild in these times, they were mystical places, they held so much context for the local people. They were places of boundary markers, they linked to the ancestors, and also they were just places of complex spiritual worship. Whereas today you find that the woodlands are totally managed. If you go and try and find a standing tree, a standing green tree, you end up just being sent to a timber yard to get planks, stuff like that. So we've had a real problem trying to source the stuff. We use a combination of our traditional tools and also modern day tools as well, just to see how the two compare. We found that the traditional tools, the Iron Age and the Bronze Age tools, will take on average about 2 weeks longer, 2 times longer to produce the same effect as a traditional tool. That's our toolkit there. You can see they're quite basic, and you can get a good sharp edge on them, but what you do find is that sometimes they just fall apart. If you use them too much, if you're overactive with them, the heads can fall off or they just become loose. This became really annoying to us as we were trying to get the project finished in time. But what we discovered was, you put it in the context of the people who originally used these tools. To them, this was cutting edge technology. And in the same way that in my workshop, I'll go and put a battery on charge in a power tool. This is the way they use the tools. This is the way they worked. It's just the way it was accepted. That's me roughing out the inside with an adze. We used alder wood for the Pallasboy vessel, which it's got a deep spiritual significance in Ireland because it actually bleeds, the sap that comes out of it. You start cutting, you can see in the picture there, the cuts that I've made there are quite white, and within about 20 minutes they start to go red. The next day it's a complete brick orange colour, a bit similar to the colour of the roads around here, that kind of really strong colour. And the people used to think that they were bleeding, it was showing signs of blood. That's the finished vessel in the museum in Cork. But our work doesn't stop there. What we're interested in is the culture around this. How can you explore that? Because there is no documented evidence of what was going on. So we explore it in the context of our own culture. So we look at how we react with this. So we invite people like artists, scholars, to get involved in our projects as well and bring their understanding to it. So one thing we did in the museum was invited some experimental musicians to come in, and they did a sounding on the vessel and saw what kind of, if it made any music, if that was a possibility. Another thing we did, we floated it on the river just to see, because some people said it was a boat, and we discovered it wasn't a boat because it just overturned straight away. Another thing was spoken about was it a crib for a royal baby? So we tried that out. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make some prehistory beer in it next, because that's another thing. But hope the baby's behaved itself before we start making beer in there, really. So from the Pallasboy vessel, we decided we got some more funding from the foundation, which we were very, very grateful for, and we decided to explore these anthropomorphic figures that are found through the whole of Northern Europe. They date from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age. So the Bronze Age, we're talking about 2600 BC. The one on the left there is called the Balikulish goddess, which we'll come across later on. That's one we made a reproduction of. They're very strange figures. They've got deep significance. They may be markers for territory. They may be ancestors. They may be gods. We don't really know. A lot of them are buried in a votive way, so they're buried in the same way they would bury sacrificial people. To start with, we ran some workshops. We've got some people there from the experimental archaeology department in Dublin making their own figures, and then we had another workshop in Cork. What we tried to do with people is to get them to interact with the making process and to think about what they were doing and who this person represented in a way of just exploring what these figures were. I love the picture of the child and the mother. The guy's a poet, and he came along to help us out, and his family came too. And that picture, for me, could have been taken 2,000 years ago. I think it just represents what we're trying to do here. It's just that sense of how these things were made. These are the Bronze Age tools we had for this project. They are earlier than the Iron Age tools. But from my understanding, I think they're just so beautiful, and they were lovely to work with. They didn't hold an edge as long, but because they are not forged, they're cast and then polished, they just got such a fineness to them. So, and then you can see the hide glue and sap is used to hold them in place. And that's me working on our Balikulish goddess. We did it in Scotland, in the area where she was found, and we involved the local community as well. We asked them to do everything from, they gave us local knowledge, their understanding of the figure, because the figure has got a lot of meaning for them. And also they went and found small little quartz stones that are found on the lock edge where she was discovered. And these stones were used in her eyes on the original figure. So we try and involve them as much as possible, make it part of their project. And that's the finished figure. You can see she's quite different from the original one that's in the museum in Edinburgh, that was quite badly damaged now. That's the area where she was found, and on her chest she had 3 similar ridges, which are called the Dragon's Teeth, these mountain ranges in Scotland. Some people think she's a fertility goddess, some people think she was a goddess of the mountains, some people think she's a goddess of storm, like a sea hag. People give offerings to her before they went across the loch, so they were protected. The community, we left the figure with the community, and they buried her as she would have been originally, and we're going to go back in a year's time and rediscover her, and we've got a team from the BBC who are interested to film that as part of Scottish heritage and Scottish culture. So we were really excited by what we'd done with the Balikulish figure and what we'd done with these figures, and we were just thinking, what can we do next? Well, that's her in the local community school as well. We just took her around a few schools. She appeared in the paper, places like that. So the children had a really interesting reaction to her. Some were totally scared of her, and others just really, really sort of felt a warmness to her. So from there, we felt we wanted to take on a bigger challenge. We came to the foundation again, who yet again supported us, which we were really grateful for. And we wanted to look at these Iron Age boats that have been discovered in wetland areas all over Europe, Northern Europe. They were really simple dugout canoes, very, very early, some of them. They're again 2,600 years old, 3,000 years old. And they were used for fishing, for exploration, and also for just carrying goods around. There's an example of one in Dublin Museum, which is, if I'm right in thinking, 50 foot long, which is incredible. This one that we're working on is in Loch Corrib in the west of Ireland, and it was, I think it's about 17 foot long. So it's still under the water because the finance isn't there to bring it up and to preserve it. So all we're working on is some technical drawings that have been taken from it. But you can see this again could have been a votive offering because there's a spear that's been left in there, and that is actually a Iron Age axe. You can see the axe head down there, and it's wedged under one of the roundels running through the canoe. So we're going to recreate the axe, we're going to recreate the spear, recreate everything. And that's the drawing that we're working on. That's all that we've got really technically to work from. But it's got a really interesting square section. Whereas normally on a log canoe you see they use the shape of the tree to create the canoe, but this takes quite a lot of work to do that. It's a lot more involved. So we're doing the same thing, and we'll see how that works when it's on the water. Trouble again, sourcing timber. Obviously we needed a standing oak, which is about 20 foot long and 3 foot wide. We managed to find one, and you can see the size of it. It's not a very clear picture, but that's a big log carrying tractor moving it into a barn for us to work on. The tractor was actually tipping up on its top wheels as it was trying to lift it. And when you see things like that, you realise the resolve of these early woodworkers to work with timbers on that scale. You know, how that was done. We're experimenting with moving it around on our own, but it's quite a challenge. We did use chainsaws to cut it down and to clean the timber off, because to chop that down with our Iron Age axe, which is about that wide, we estimated would take about 2 weeks. This is something that we're up against as well. We've got time constraints with our working time, so certain processes we use modern day tools for, but then we always do a test area as well, just to calculate wear on the tools, man hours involved, and also the punishment of our bodies. You know, these tools aren't used, they're not, they're very, very basic, and by the end of the day you can hardly move your hands, you have blisters, cramps. So they're very much hard work to use, and there again it gives you an insight into the working lives of these early people. That's me digging away with an axe there, and that's Dilly. She's a forester, and she's helping us clean up around the edges of the wood. Now we looked at different processes for clearing out the inside. We were looking around the world, people who are still making these boats are still in use. And we looked at the indigenous people of America have a technique of burning the inside, which I was really interested in doing, but the rest of the team didn't want to risk that one. So in the end, we went for this block cutting method, where an axe is used to split blocks of about 10 inches by 5 inches wide. And then we use an adze to crack the end, and they come out as like a brick. So that's the way we clean. You just keep doing that until you get to the right depth. That's the inside cleaned out. That's Dilly the dog, and you can see we got to this, but we didn't finish it. We want to work with the way the trees were worked at the time, and they work seasonally. So they would fell the tree in the winter time. They would, when the sap's low and there's no leaves on the tree. This is an oak, by the way. And then they would submerge it in water for a few months until the springtime, so it didn't split, bring it up, and then carry on working on it again, and then maybe submerge it again. So we saw a nasty split running through the timber as we were cleaning it up, and we thought that's going to be an issue. So we filled it with water, and of course it leaks. And this is something, again, that an Iron Age woodworker could have felled that tree, spent months working on it, and to them it's useless. We can get around it, but it highlights the issues. That if something's hidden in the wood like that. Sorry. Don't know what that is. So what we've done now, we've submerged our boat in an ice. I've heard recently it's covered in ice now, but in a lake in Ireland, in Bray, just outside of Dublin. And it's under the water there now. And then we'll return in April, raise it, take it to the historic boatyard in Methilmaro in Dublin, and carry on the recrafting process. And our aim is to get it ready for the Festival of the Sea, and then it will go down the River Lee and see whether it floats or not. And that's our WordPress blog, which has got more information. It's got films of our work and everything else we do. And I'd just like to end, I'd like to ask myself a question really, which does get asked quite a lot, is why do this? Why do we spend our time doing this? There's no clear evidence. There will never be clear evidence. It's all theory based. We're just experimenting all the time. The questions that we're asking are unanswerable questions. But for us, those unanswerable questions are the most important questions to ask, because you're constantly discovering. It makes you look at your own crafting process. It makes you look at your own culture. It makes you look at our relationship with this amazing resource of wood. And also, the past is a mirror to the people we are now, and how we react with timber, how we look after this resource. When we look at these people and how they worked, it gives us just ideas, and it gives us more respect. And that's everything. Thank you.